Good morning. Thanks for being here. My name is Marisa Nelson. I'm a lawyer at the law office of Marisa Nelson PC. Thanks for joining us, Jessica. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Jess Coleman, and I am the co-founder of Hello Sage Creative, which is a full-service brand and web studio for female entrepreneurs. And I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'll have to talk a little bit more about that. Let's see. Let me just start with the initial spiel. I am an attorney licensed in California. I focus on wills, trusts, and probates. So some of what goes on in my work is definitely state specific. Anything that comes up today is probably worth figuring out what applies in your own states. But we're going to keep it kind of general today. I'm not giving legal advice, and I think a lot of what comes up in these conversations is applicable throughout the United States. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, tell me a little bit about what questions have been coming up for you.
Yeah, so my mom is in her mid-60s and she lives pretty close to me. And she recently became the primary caregiver for my aunt, her older sister, who has been diagnosed with dementia, possibly Alzheimer's. We're trying to kind of get to the bottom of all of that. And she really doesn't have any immediate family of her own that is capable of taking care of her. And she's also got a myriad of other health problems, clinical depression, rheumatoid arthritis, like just a lot of stuff going on with her. And so where we are right now is she just is, I would say, really not interested in doing any estate planning or anything like that. It's a very difficult conversation that we're bumping up against with her. As it stands right now, everything we believe is willed to her one remaining son, who is an abusive drug addict and just all around terrible person. And so there's just a lot of things going into that. My mom was made power of attorney in 2019, I believe. We don't have that paperwork. My aunt doesn't have it, but we do believe that's on file somewhere. And so I think generally, we're just kind of curious about what rights and powers my mom has in that capacity to kind of navigate this with my aunt.
Wow, that is a lot to deal with in so many ways. Yeah, I'm sorry that your family is working through all that. A lot of that is definitely why I encourage people to get planning done as early as possible. I know that's not very helpful right now, but as a kind of warning for people that aren't at that place yet. And then, of course, with someone who's willing and able to proceed with more planning, like the earlier you can do it, the better. Oftentimes, there's a progression with dementia and related diseases, and maybe when it's first caught, the person has enough understanding to set up more things, fix anything that's not already set up. But as it progresses, it can get to a point where they don't have the legal ability to sign legal documents, and that can make it even harder for the people trying to help them. So I think it's smart to look into any existing power of attorney and see what can be done there. I guess I'll back up a little bit and talk just what a power of attorney is. So again, this is going to be somewhat state specific, but generally speaking, a power of attorney enables someone else that you appoint with this power of attorney to act on your behalf with regard to financial things. They vary from super simple, limited documents. They can even be for a specific task. In estate planning, they're usually intended to be quite broad. And I definitely prefer a version of a power of attorney that is very broad, very specific, very detailed in, you can do like all of these things for me if it's needed. The person appointed under a power of attorney is a fiduciary, so they are bound to do what's best for the person who's created the power of attorney, which can help people feel better about creating something like this, because it is a powerful thing to give someone else the power to act for this with these things for you. And it can be so super helpful in situations like this and other situations as well. Just anytime we're not able or willing to pay the bills, deal with PG&E, deal with healthcare costs, deal with like any financial thing that can come up, which can be just as much about our own personal care as it is about finances.
Right. Yeah.
And there is a version of a power. I've just described a financial power of attorney. There are also healthcare powers of attorney. Similar thing entirely around healthcare. Also super important in many situations, including this one. So in some states, they may take slightly different forms, but generally speaking, we all have some version of that. So a couple places that might be helpful to look for an existing one. Sometimes a copy is given to the financial advisor if the person has one at the time. Sometimes they're given to banks or other financial institutions at the time they're created. Banks also often have their own version of that form that just applies to that bank account. So that's another good place to look. Healthcare powers of attorney are often and should be provided to the doctor or healthcare provider when they're created or anytime thereafter. So that's a good place to check as well for the medical powers is the medical record with the doctor or healthcare agency.
Okay.
And of course, if a lawyer was used to prepare any of these documents, then they would probably have a copy and or an original. A lot of lawyers, banks, healthcare institutions have limits on who they can talk to, but if the document you're trying to get names the person that's talking to them, hopefully that will open some doors, and that might be necessary to point that out. If they're like, oh, I can't talk to you, you're not on here, like, okay, that the only thing I'm looking for is this document, which hopefully names me, so can you just check that? Yeah. And then I'll provide you what you need to move forward. So those will be some really good places to check. One other place that is worth checking. Sometimes powers of attorney are recorded with the local county recorder's office, clerk recorder. In my work, that's pretty rare because we'll usually use a trust for real estate, and then that wouldn't be necessary to record the power of attorney. But when there is real estate and no trust, we might record the power of attorney in the county where the real estate is. So that's another thing to look at.
If mom is the healthcare power of attorney, which I believe may be the situation, I don't know that for a fact, but and she's not the financial power of attorney, is there any course of remedying that, and is there any I guess rights that she has as the healthcare that could maybe help her to get that financial power of attorney if needed?
Not that I'm aware of, other than just trying to have a conversation with your aunt. Maybe at the right moment, she might be more amenable to, hey, I really need this to help you in order to do this thing for you that you want me to do. And that can be really situation specific, whether she's willing to do that or not. But it's a fine line at that point between influencing someone unduly to give you a power and just trying to get something done to take care of them. So that's something to be aware of. But having the document ready to go and saying, hey, I need you to sign this so that I can do this thing for you. Like, otherwise you're going to have to do it yourself, and you don't seem to want to. Yeah. It's a really tough situation when you're trying to take care of someone and they're not helping. Yeah, I've been there. So unfortunately, there are limits to what we can force upon someone for their own good. Right. there may be a point where they are completely unable to take care of themselves, where you have a little bit more options, but there's a lot of range in between there. So those are some starting points and things to think about there.
Brought up real estate, and we do have actually kind of a strange complication around real estate. So my aunt was willed my grandparents' house, and so she is the owner right now. And so we're assuming that as her will stands right now, with everything going to her son, that house would go to him as well, unless something happens, which is obviously upsetting my mom and my uncle. So is there anything there we should be thinking about, or any recourse in terms of, just at least that one piece of her holdings that we could do something about?
If the house is in her name and not like in a continuing trust or something, probably not a lot that can be done other than, again, trying to have some kind of conversation around it. If when there's like an ongoing trust, that it's still in the trust and it says what happened next, that's a separate thing. But if it's in her name, I am unaware of anything that can help there besides just trying to help her see reason. And some options there may be, of course, like the interests of the other family members, and also her son. If she's wanting to provide for him, there's ways to do that may be better for him as well as the rest of the family, that she could provide for him without giving everything outright, so that if she wants to take care of him but remove some of the possibility for bad decisions or decisions that others wouldn't approve of, there may be some planning options there. So that might be something to bring up if she's in a mood where we can have that conversation.
Can you say a little bit about what those options might be?
Yeah. So it varies a bit with your aunt's desires as well as her son's conditions, but one option might be like a special needs trust, or maybe a general needs trust for a person who's having those issues. You can say like, I want my assets to benefit my son, but I want someone else to manage them for him. And so that would be either a special needs trust or maybe a general needs trust with parameters set up around like, my son's the beneficiary, this person will manage the assets for him. I want him to have a safe place to live. I want his medical costs covered, or whatever the wishes and assets make sense there. So that he can benefit without being in control, because not everyone has the financial ability to really manage property well. And then along with that, she could say who inherits after him if the assets are still in existence. Generally speaking, and again, this might vary from state to state, but most of the time with a will, you're saying, when I die, this person gets the property and that's the end of it. They own it. There's no future rules or restrictions on them. But with a trust, one of the big common benefits is to be able to say, I want this person to benefit from this property throughout their lifetime or for some set period of time. And then when they're gone, I decide who gets it next, instead of them deciding what they've inherited, where it goes. So that can be an option as well, to say, I really do want to benefit my son, but after he's gone, then I want it to stay in the family or go to my sister and brother, or, my son's kids, or all of my nieces and nephews. So there's a little more ability to manage things down the line instead of saying, here you go, good luck.
When it comes to managing that trust, is that something we can appoint someone outside of the family to do? Because I think one of the concerns my mom has around that is, having to, getting into a confrontation with my cousin around these things. She doesn't want to be that point person for him. So is there option?
Yeah, I think that's really wise. Family drama is definitely a factor there. People act differently with family than they do with strangers and professionals. So yeah, there are professional trustees, professional fiduciaries who act as trustee, power of attorney, any executor, all the financial roles, and sometimes healthcare as well. So there's two main categories of professional fiduciaries who could fill that role. One is banks sometimes have trust departments, banks and brokerage financial companies. In my opinion, they vary widely on whether they're a good idea or not. But there are the big banks that we've all heard of that I tend to shy away from for this purpose. And then there are often smaller local banks that will have a trust department. Not all of them do. So that's something to look at. Like, do you have a trust department? And what types of estates will you do this work for? They might have restrictions on location or types of assets. They do deal with real estate, or they don't deal with real estate, or they have a minimum asset value or something like that. So that's something to look at. But the benefit with banks is that they have a department, a team, a procedure, they're insured, they have longevity. One person retires, the company still is there. The other main category of professional fiduciaries is individuals or small businesses who, private professional fiduciaries. I believe this would be true in most, if not all states, but it's a good thing to look into if they exist, and if there is an oversight body in your state, they can also be a good place to look at for where to find one. But yeah, individuals, small companies who do the same thing, they act as trustee, power of attorney, et cetera, for other people, but in a small business type of structure, which can be a great fit as well. They often have a little more flexibility in what they'll take on. You can meet the person and decide if they're a good fit if you want to do that. They may have different structure for what they will take on and what they won't. They may be more flexible that way. Might have more of a personal connection with the family if you want that. But regardless, both options there can be great for removing some of the family drama, taking the stress off a family member who is not only dealing with family members that don't want them in control, but also learning how to do this whole stressful thing that they've never done before, and they have a job and kids of their own, just trying to fit it in. Whereas these professionals, like, this is their day job, they know how to do it, they have the connections. So that can be a really good option. And one other question that comes up a lot there is, like, how do they get paid? When do they get paid? If you are naming them for, like, someday I want this person to serve, they will not get paid until they actually start doing the job. So there's no cost to just listing them in the documents as a backup. In this case, it would probably be a little bit more urgent, but fees vary widely, and I definitely think it's worth looking into it because it can really save a lot of stress and non-financial costs as well. So
yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think, just listening to you talk and the research that we've done, that probably the ideal situation would be for my aunt to update her will, first of all, that she created in, like, the 80s, I think. And then perhaps set up a trust to where she can distribute some of her assets to her son in a kind of managed way. Is there anything else beyond those two things that you would recommend that we look into for her?
I mean, one other piece that often comes up here is the variety of public benefits that may or may not apply. Everything from, like, Medicare and the state specific variations to, like, in-home care options, which may or may not be covered by the government. Residential places that may or may not have benefits that way. It can be a lot to look into. They don't often make it easy to figure out what what applies, what you qualify for, how to obtain those. There are professionals that can help with that process to some extent. Um, but I think that can be helpful to at least like have an initial like, do any of these apply? Would any of them be helpful for getting her care in some variation? And this is night theory. Each benefit comes with different, like, how do you qualify? Is there a financial component? Like, do you have to have like 0 assets to qualify? Is your house exempt from that, but other assets count towards that calculation? But I think it's worth at least looking to see, like, does any of that apply and might it be helpful here?
Okay, that's great. Do you have any recommendations around, I know there are lawyers that estate lawyers that specialize in kind of elder law and things like that. As looking for someone to help us navigate all of this and manage all of this in our state, do you have any recommendations around kind of what to look for or who to start with, those kinds of things?
Yeah. I definitely recommend looking for a lawyer who focuses on this area of law. It's there's too much to know to do like criminal law and estate planning
Yeah.
within estate planning, as you alluded to, there is a subspecialty of elder law. And that may be useful here, especially if there's any potential for public benefits. Often elder law attorneys have additional knowledge in that area that can save a lot of time and stress around, like, do we go after these benefits? Do we get disqualified by having this? Is there any planning that can be done to increase our access to these types of things, including medical care? So I think that's a good place to start, probably an elder care attorney, and just, upfront ask them, hey, here's what's going on. Is this something you help with? Is this something you deal with a lot? And it may be that more of a broader just estate planning wills and trust attorney is also a good fit, but I think it's a good place to start with an elder care attorney and see if that's something to consider. And I would talk to a couple different people. As much as we all hate tire kickers as business owners, I think it's important to find someone that you can talk to and that you communicate well with and trust their advice.
Okay.
And there's a lot of different places to look. Obviously, recommendations from family and friends is a great place to start. Yelp, if that's common in your area. Many state bars make available records on their attorneys, so you can make sure that they haven't been disbarred or complaints against or whatever. Hopefully not a common thing, but it's a good like initial question to ask. So yeah, hopefully that gets you started. One other place to look might be estateplanning.com. It sounds doesn't sound like it's a good web address, but it does have a good community of lawyers through Wealth Counsel. So it is a paid community, but they tend to attract good quality lawyers. So
Okay, great. Thank you.
yeah.
I really appreciate all of this. This has been really helpful. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that I should have, or anything you feel like we're missing as we're thinking about all of this?
Nothing comes to mind other than maybe trying to take this as a motivator for others in the family to get something in place, even if it's just like the most basic starting point. It can be really easy to put off, and I find one of the biggest motivators is something happening in the family that's kind of a wake-up call. I know that can be a lot to deal with on top of the current family situation, but beyond that, just try to be gentle on yourselves. It's a lot. You're all doing your best, I'm sure, and there's limits to what we can do. And if she won't accept help, then that makes it really challenging, and you're doing your best. So I think you're asking all the right questions, and good luck to you and your mom and your aunt, and I hope things go as smoothly as they can.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, anything else before I wrap up?
I can't think of anything. Is there anything that you want me to cover or anything on your end would be helpful for us to talk about?
I think we're pretty good, but if you want to talk just a little bit more about your business and what you do, if you'd like to do a quick plug, we can do that real quick.
Sure. So Hello Sage Creative is, as I mentioned, a full service brand and web studio for female entrepreneurs. So I'm the head writer, and then I have a business partner who is a graphic designer, a really gifted graphic designer. So we do everything from helping you set up your branding, messaging, your logos, your color suites, all of that, to getting your website up and running. So a lot of times what we see is with female entrepreneurs who are ready to go to that next level, that their website and their branding isn't really supporting them in that transition. And so that's what we really like to do, is just give you the tools you need to get where you want to go. So yeah, we're a little bit of new, so we've got some founder pricing going on right now, but lots of experience in the business, and we're excited to be helping this group.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super important stuff. And I know for me, something that is not within my strengths at all. So
Yes.
well worth it to hand off to the expert. So awesome.
Thank you for that.
All right. Thanks for being here.